Ben squats in the dust at the edge of town, watching the black birds with red featherless heads circle above him.
They're called vultures.
He thinks.
Were called that in the before time, at least. But now they're just birds. The names of things don't matter anymore. And whatever they're called, they're waiting for me to die so they can eat me. When they do, I won't have a name. Not to them. I know that. I've always known it.
The sky is the color of a fresh bruise, one enormous black sheet with swirling pools of crimson and violet. It has been that way for almost as long as Ben can remember. There was a time when screaming ships shot across the sky from one end to the other like racers on a track. The sky was blue then, and there were clouds, some that looked like dogs.
A brown puppy I knew named Buster.
And ducks and ladders and even spaceships.
Oh, how they shot across the sky!
Ben doesn't miss that sky. Can't miss something he never really knew. But there's still a feeling there buried. Maybe it's jealousy for those who did know the clouds. All he knows is the scorched sky.
My heart's the same color,
he thinks. When his business is done, Ben pulls up his overalls, clasps them across his shoulders, and walks away from the desert toward the center of the last dying town on the last dying rock in the entire universe. He trudges past row after row of shotgun houses lined up so closely they're almost touching, their sun-bleached porches like misshapen teeth rotting in the dry heat of some ancient beast's mouth. People in tattered shirts and ill-fitting dresses sit and stare at Ben with blank, dirty faces and black irises. And they don't say a thing. That's the worst part. Ben feels their eyes burning into him from both sides of the narrow path, knows their mouths are opening and closing without a sound. He refuses to meet their gazes, fearing what may happen if he does. He keeps his eyes on the dusty road. Ben stops in his tracks at the center of town, clenching both fists and digging yellowed nails into his palms. The woman with the black hair is coming. She stops, towering over him.
Look at you,
she sneers, her trench coat swirling. Ben looks down at his soiled denim but doesn't speak.
Out there doing your business in the dirt like some animal,
she shrieks.
I'd like to do it in your hand,
he whispers. She's upon him at once. Her hand with its long fingers and red-painted nails strikes his face, leaving an angry, throbbing welt. He takes the blow without flinching.
You know better than to talk back to me, boy.
Her blue eyes are flecked with gold, like the burning sky from the before time.
Have you forgotten what happened last time?
Ben looks at the jagged scar running down his left arm.
What about your manners?
Ben lowers his head.
What's the point?
The point?
Her laugh is bitter, triumphant.
I'm the point, don't you see? I'm the last admirable woman in this godforsaken world, Benjamin. I feed you, don't I? Clothe you, so the vultures don't swoop down and take you and the rest of them away? Yes, I do. Aren't I merciful? Aren't I?
She shouts the last part, cocking her arm again.
Yes, yes.
Ben answers, his head still down.
Just birds,
he thinks.
Names don't matter, not even mine.
He doesn't see her lower her arm again.
Look at me,
the woman commands, drawing out each syllable. Ben raises his head, his eyes narrow slits.
Yes, yes, what?
He waits for a moment, letting his anger subside.
Madam,
he finally says.
She cares about the names of things, especially her name.
That's better. Now run along. And remember, you're supposed to be repairing my fence. Today.
And then she's gone. Ben watches her walk down the dusty street where the black tar surface used to be.
Asphalt.
he tells himself.
That's what they called it before it all crumbled into dust.
His mind wanders to an overgrown field beside a narrow asphalt road. He can smell the acrid stench of burning tar, hear his father's voice. It will all be over soon, he promises. Don't you worry. A lifetime ago. Ben hits himself on the head 3 times for 3 words before he forgets.
Fix the fence.
It's not the first time Ben has repaired something for the madam. He reshingled her roof 2 years ago while the dark birds watched, waiting for their dinner to fall and break its neck. Fixed her brick chimney the year after that. He'd repainted the entire of her house with a single brush just a month ago and still had calluses to show for it. And now her stupid fence. He knows she'll have boards for him that look brand new, like they were just milled. Shiny nails in a see-through package and a tool to drive the nails in.
A hammer.
Where she gets them, Ben doesn't know, but he doesn't dwell on it.
She needs that fence.
Ben figures.
Needs it real bad.
He's seen what happens when the townsfolk aren't fed properly. They congregate outside her gate, mouths wide and black eyes staring. They never say a thing. Sometimes when she's too long with it, one of them will go out to the edge of town and lie down and let the dark birds take them away. To the birds, the people have no names. Ben had a friend once. He thinks about her often, lying on his cot in the darkness of his room. Her name was Daphne. It was the only name that ever mattered. The first time Ben met Daphne, she was carrying 2 buckets filled to the brim with water.
Before the well had gone dry.
The water sloshed every time she took a step, splashing on her bare feet, and she giggled. Her eyes were still mostly green then, the dark black tendrils only starting to creep in from the edges. When she smiled, her eyes smiled too.
By the time you get back to town, you're gonna be down to 1 bucket, I'm afraid.
Ben joked.
Half an each?
She stopped, searching her mind for the right response, one that sparkled like glass but didn't cut as deeply. When she'd settled on one, she set both buckets down and crossed her arms.
That may be so, but I have time yet to remedy that. Looks like it's too late for you. You're already down to half a brain.
When she laughed, it was the sound of a rolling brook on a clear spring day. Ben walks towards the madam's house in the same stained overalls and tattered underwear he always wears. The black bottoms of his feet hiss and scrape against the packed earth. Pick up your feet when you walk, his father used to say. But he doesn't hear those words anymore.
What use is any of it?
Ben thinks.
What good has it done? We destroyed ourselves anyway, despite our names, despite picking our feet off the floor, despite it all.
No, they're no use to him now. His father's been gone a long time, and those old words are just as cracked and dry as the hands Ben will use to mend the madam's fence. Soon the house appears atop a hill ahead of him, its windows lit with magic light.
Not magic. You know what it is, dummy. Electricity. It's not magic just because none of the other houses have it.
Ben knows where it comes from. He can already hear the humming of the machines that make it for the madam. At the bottom of the hill is a 12-foot high fence with thick boards. Some of them are grayed with time, others newer. At the center is an intricate metal gate adorned with the image of an anchor on one side and a diving bell on the other.
Anchor? Diving bell?
Ben doesn't recognize either. The madam waits behind the gate.
She saw me coming.
Ben thinks.
She always sees.
Benjamin,
She says, glancing at her wrist. There's a timekeeper on it.
does this look like today to you?
Ben squints and can just make out a circular shape,
The sun.
dipping below the horizon and peeking through the sky's veil like charcoal ridges through rubbing paper, a shadow of the blazing yellow ball from his memories.
It's still the same day.
He says.
Besides, I've worked by the big light before.
The madam's cheek twitches and her nostrils flare.
I'm sorry.
Ben offers before her annoyance becomes full-blown rage.
Fine.
She says, appeased. She bends down and flicks a switch. An enormous spotlight turns on with a clang, bathing the left side of the fence in its eerie manufactured light. Ben can see the part of the fence that has rotted away, only a handful of boards, and the stack of new lumber the madam has piled on the other side.
You aren't afraid the light will draw them?
She wonders.
They're harmless enough.
Ben answers, glancing back toward town.
Just like me, I reckon.
Give yourself a little credit, Benjamin. You're smarter than they are.
She takes a step forward, now illuminated by the spotlight. The madam is no longer wearing her trench coat. Ben's eyes wander to the two perky breasts peeking out of the low-cut top she's wearing. The madam laughs and covers her chest with her hand.
You naughty thing,
she says. Ben acts caught, lowering his eyes quickly. He doesn't think of the madam that way. Wouldn't touch her if he could. But there's no harm in letting her think so.
Yes, I'm smarter than them. And one day I'll show you.
Ben thinks. But not today. Today is for mending fences and for the reward that follows, food. Ben's hand strays to his churning belly. When the madam realizes Ben's not going to ogle her, her face darkens.
Get to work.
She shrieks.
I expect this to be done before midnight.
She turns and stomps up the steps toward the front door.
Midnight?
Midnight has no real meaning to Ben. There's no moon, and the twilight hours are all the same to him. He gets to work quickly anyway. The spotlight does not draw a crowd like the madam thinks it will. Only a single person from town shows. A young girl who can't be more than 6 years old. She stands just at the edge of the light, clutching some stuffed animal tightly to her chest. She's wearing a torn,
Used to be.
blue dress that once had lace at the bottom. Still does on one of the sleeves, and her hair is in pigtails. Her black irises follow his every movement, but he tries not to think about them. Ben remembers sitting in the dust at the far edge of town, the side opposite the madam's house, many months after he and Daphne had become friends.
She can't see us over here, Daphne.
Ben said.
I promise.
Ben liked to say her name. It felt like fresh rainwater on his tongue.
I don't trust her, Ben. She sees everything.
Daphne sat with her knees clutched to her chest. Her hair, so fair it was almost silver, was pulled back with a piece of twine. Ben liked it that way, but never told her. He'd never told her any of the things he felt about her.
Well, we're not doing anything anyway.
He says.
We're only friends.
We're not even supposed to be around each other.
Daphne straightened up, tucking her chin to create a second one underneath.
I don't need another mouth to feed.
She screeched in a mocking voice, much higher than her own.
I see how you two look at each other.
Then she lowered her voice, leaned over, and cupped one hand over the side of her mouth.
What I really want is to be between you.
Ben doubled over in laughter, clutching his stomach and rolling onto his back. Daphne followed suit soon after. They had lain there for some time, staring up at the sky and talking between intermittent bursts of giggling. Ben had left for so long the salt from his tears made the corner of his eyes raw. That's how it always was when he was with Daphne. Pleasure and pain locked in an endless battle. And that was the madam's doing. The morning after the works on the madam's fence, Ben is outside her gate again. There's no bell, no way to reach her at all other than shouting. But he never has to shout.
Why are you bothering me?
The madam stands on her upper balcony wearing a silk nightgown the color of the sky. A gust of dry wind lifts it away from her body, revealing the bare skin beneath.
She wants me to see.
He thinks.
Those boards!
Ben shouts back, pointing to the leftover lumber on the other side of the fence.
Wait right there.
She commands, disappearing into the house. Ben waits and remembers. The day Daphne disappeared, Ben was outside the madam's fence, vision white with anger and hands clenched around the iron bars of the gate. He'd found Daphne's house deserted and a note on her cot, scratched in charcoal.
I'm sorry. I had to. I know how you felt. D.
Ben banged on the gate until his hands were bruised and bleeding. Finally, the madam appeared at her front door. She made her way down the steps, slowly, like molasses dripping from a spoon, savoring every single second Ben had to wait.
What did you do to her?
He screamed when she reached the bottom.
She was my only friend!
The madam stood with her hands behind her back, a poisoned grin sneaking across her face.
You did it to her.
Me?
He repeated, spittle flying from his mouth.
What did I do?
You loved her, Benjamin, and that was quite enough.
You evil bitch!
Oh, come now.
She cooed.
Let's be civil. You should know she left on her own volition, unharmed.
No, you're a lying bitch.
Not so.
There's nothing out there.
That may be true.
She paused.
I gave her a choice, Benjamin. She could leave, or I could kill you. She was gone within the hour.
Blinded by sudden anger, the kind that twists your gut like sickness, Ben pressed his cheek against the bars and reached through, his fingers stopping only inches from the madam's face. Before he could blink, she'd grabbed his arm and spun around, pressing her back against the gate for leverage.
Let's teach you some manners, shall we?
Ben felt the knife before he saw it. It pierced Ben's skin just below the elbow and filleted his forearm almost to his wrist. She let go as he yanked it back, gasping in pain.
Now you have something to remember her by.
The madam spat, eyeing the stained knife.
Now run along and bandage it before you bleed out. Take what you need for your repairs.
The madam says from inside the gate, still in her gown.
I have no use for them.
Ben makes sure he doesn't touch her as they pass beneath the gate's arch. The madam inspects Ben's work on the fence as he gathers the new lumber in his arms. As Ben exits the gate, there's a flicker of movement behind the madam. When the shot rings out, Ben thinks for a moment the universe itself might have ripped, that things are finally over, thank God. Then he sees the look of terror on the madam's face and the hole that is opened right above her breasts. He realizes his hands are covering his ears. Ben waits for her to clutch at the hole to try and stem the red tide spilling out of her, but she can't. She's already dead. She falls onto her face, her blood pooling only momentarily before soaking into the dry earth. The man who stands behind the madam has Ben's face and looks at Ben the same way Ben looks at himself in the shard of glass tacked to his bedroom wall. His eyes are blue, like the madam's, and he's much older than Ben. This means something important, but Ben can't quite grasp it. The man drops the weapon
Gun.
to his side. "Come on, Ben, we don't have much time," he shouts, rushing at his younger twin. Ben cowers as if the man is going to strike him, but he only grabs Ben's arm and leads him through the open gate.
He knows my name.
Ben tells himself as they take the stairs 2 at a time. Something deep inside him responds.
Of course he does.
When they reach the top, Ben pulls away from the man's grasp and looks out over the town. For a moment, he marvels at how different it all looks from up there. Then his eyes dart to the houses and to the people who are beginning to come down off their porches. They're walking in the direction of the madam's house. "Ben, inside, now!" the man shouts. When Ben looks back, the front door is already open. He hurries through and joins the man in the foyer of the house. The man slams the door and locks it, then leads Ben into the main living area. Ben stops in the middle of the room, his mouth wide open. The walls
Color, sky, and grass, and sunlight.
are lined in shelves which hold curiosities Ben has never seen and couldn't have dreamed up if he tried. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. The man disappears down a hallway, but Ben doesn't follow. In the adjoining room, Ben finds cabinets made of painted wood and shining metal machines. A shallow pan filled with scrambled egg yolks sits atop one, still sizzling.
What marvels.
He thinks.
When did it all go to ruin? Ben!
The man shouts from down the hall. Ben awakens from his reverie and rushes towards the sound of the man's voice. The room at the end of the hall is different than any room Ben has ever been in. The walls aren't mud, wood, or even plaster. They're metal. Smooth, gray metal. The ceiling and the floor, too. There's a chair in the center suspended above the floor and attached to a large bank of screens and blinking lights that connects to the ceiling. Tubes run from a glowing ring to metal panels on either side of the room. The man is huddled over one of the panels.
Come here and watch,
The man commands.
We haven't got long. They'll be finished with the madam shortly, and then they'll take the house.
Ben shuffles to the man's side and watches as he works the buttons and dials.
Can you remember that?
I think so.
Ben answers.
No, over here.
The man leads Ben to the far wall and repeats the process.
See? This dial controls where you go, when you go. You have to set it here or you'll die before you get back.
Get back?
Ben echoes. It's as if he's seeing it all from underwater, sounds muffled, shapes distorted.
What is all this?
A time machine. The madam uses it to...
The man pauses mid-sentence, cocking his head. Ben can just make out the dull thumps coming from the main room. The townsfolk are beating on the front door.
Sit down, Ben. Right here.
The man grabs Ben's arm and drags him to the seat.
The madam uses it to go back to before the sky was scorched.
He explains again as he straps Ben in.
To when the earth was still green. That's where all this stuff comes from. The food, the clothes, the things you saw in the other rooms.
Ben stares blankly at the man's sky-blue eyes.
Doesn't make any sense to me either. What use is a kingdom at the end of the world?
When Ben doesn't respond, the man waves his hand.
Never mind that now. She's dead, and all the rest will be too now that the food's gone. That's why they're trying to get in.
How do you know all this?
Ben finally asks.
I think I know. Who are you?
The man smiles a familiar smile. His bottom teeth are just as crooked as Ben's.
You know who I am. I was sitting right where you're sitting. A man that looked like me showed me what buttons to push just like I showed you, and he sent me back. 30 years. Back to the before time. It's taken me all this time to find this place again. Most of the guns were destroyed when the world went dark, which is why it had to be so far back, I guess. I had to be sure.
Sure? About what? Why would you come back here? Why?
Before the man can answer, there's a crash from the front of the house. The townsfolk are through the front door. The man rushes to the door of the metal room and slams it shut. It's made of wood like all the other doors in the house. When the man turns around, he wears a smirk.
To kill the madam, of course. And God, did it feel good.
Ben's first thought is,
Yes, she deserved it.
he doesn't say it though.
You waited all that time just for revenge?
And you will too, Ben.
The man says, clenching his teeth.
You hate her just as much as I did.
All at once, Ben understands.
It just keeps happening.
He whispers.
The man nods. Around and around, like the snake that eats its own tail. We always come back to kill her.
But 30 years?
Ben cries.
What a waste! Why didn't you try to fix things? Do something important?
As he says it, he realizes he's asking himself the same questions. For the first time, Ben notices the deep creases in the man's face. His eyes are tired.
I told myself I would, Ben. I promise I did. You will too.
Behind him, a piece of the door splinters inward, the gleaming blade of an axe head poking through. The man doesn't even look back.
I thought I could come back at first, maybe choose a different time to travel to, but I couldn't. The townsfolk obviously destroyed the machine because I was stuck there.
The man chuckles.
Forgive me, Ben, it's just strange being on this side of things. Anyway, I almost joined the war when it first started. I thought maybe I could make a difference, but it didn't happen that way. I wish I had time to explain everything to you.
The man runs to one of the machines and flips a switch. A deep hum emanates from the back wall, and Ben's chair begins to gently vibrate. Now the man is holding a small metal controller in his hand. Behind him, the axe does its brutal work. Thunk, thunk, thunk. The hole is big enough that Ben can see several pairs of black eyes staring through.
Oh,
The man gasps, reaching into his pocket. He retrieves a shiny silver key and tucks it into the front pocket of Ben's overalls.
You'll need this to get into the madam's house.
What about the gate?
Ben shouts.
I could shut the front gate.
We leave it open every time. Besides, they'd eventually just tear the fence down.
The man slides a panel on the remote, revealing a single button.
I have a choice, don't I?
Ben squeaks. His voice is nearly inaudible against the time machine's roaring hum. He begins to struggle, but the iron cuffs around his wrists are unyielding.
You've already made it, Ben. Over and over and over again. We can't change who we are.
The man shouts. Ben looks past him as an emaciated arm, not much more than bone and skin, reaches through the hole in the door and blindly searches for the latch.
That's why they burned the world in the first place. Because they couldn't change who they were.
The hand finds the latch, turns it, the door bursts open, a horde of starving people with eyes as black as the sky piling through.
When they eat me, I won't have a name.
Ben thinks. The man presses the button.